Hello, as a note before we start, I just want to mention that there is too much information and the game is too complex and too vast to make it all into a single video, so I'll have to make multiple videos related to other parts of the game. Now, the video will have three main parts, which is character selection, level up, which will include stats and skills, nothing too specific because this is not a build video. And the third part will be related to the caravan upgrades and utility, and some other things related to the caravan as a whole mechanic. Now, the way the game works currently, you cannot make a pure range character, meaning you cannot be a pure archer or a pure mage. You have to have a hybrid character, so I don't recommend you try to play as an archer or a sorcerer, mage, whatever you like to call it. If this is the first time you're playing, it's also going to be less fun, because in the beginning you'll just destroy everything and then later on you'll just be destroyed by everything, because the game gets much harder as you play more of it as time passes. So what is the choice over here? Well, first of all, you see they have a unique trait. So this will be a mage, this will be an archer, but what goes beyond that? Well, it's possible to make an archer out of Arna, for example, because the abilities seem like they're pretty good overall, but it's not recommended because of their stats and some other things overall. If you want to be an archer and you start off with 10 perception, that means you need 5 levels before you can get to 15 perception. So reaching level 15 in a stat will give you big bonuses. It's also not very wise to, let's say, play Grim as a light armor character, because it doesn't really have a unique trait that will support that. So look at all of their stats, look at all of their unique traits, look at with what they start. This is not so important because you can learn this, basically you can learn all of the skills because you just need money. So don't look at this specifically because it can be very deceiving. For example, I like to play with Velmir as a dual mace wielder. Even though he seems like it's much better fitted, Grim, because he has the maces and dual wielding, I just don't like his unique trait. The effect is not that good anymore because you need to kill a lot of enemies, and some of the enemies will be super tanky right now. Besides, you have a lot more enemies that are super strong as a single unit, so this is actually... they have to modify this because in the way this version right now, it's basically useless trash. Sorry, Grim, you're the only dwarf in the rooster, but... So I choose Velmir because he can take a lot of damage and he'll also be able to give back a lot of damage.
Is that so? Don't... You can also...
Is that so? So when you start the game, I'll not be playing this save over here. Let's delete this one. And we'll go with our character that is already level 10. Currently very hungry. Yeah. So again, I'll be telling you a general build and some of the other stuff you need to be careful and look at. So, we'll not speak about weaponry, we'll speak about utility. And as you can see, you have a few basic skills that you can use over here. This is your crafting. Some recipes require you to have... well, they require you to have a workshop or a workbench. I forgot the exact definition, but we'll speak about that a bit later. The more important ones are over here. Warfare. Warfare, I think, is very important to any character that is a melee character. I mean, you can even use it as a ranged build if you like that. So, why is this so important? Because this is a hit that will hit the least protected body part of an enemy. Plus, it gives you a few bonuses that are actually very good. Especially the accuracy and minus fumble chance and some of the other stuff. Now, some people will also choose, again, this is for the first part of the game, the early game to medium game. The end game will be a little different, because you might want to have this as well. Even though Warcry is very useful, like I mentioned, there are a lot of enemies that are buffed to be very strong as a single unit, so if you use this against 2 enemies or even 3 enemies, it might not be so efficient as you think it is. And besides, you have much better skills right now, so from here out, from Warfare, I would only take Seize the Initiative. On specific builds you can take also Warcry if you feel like you're not very confident in your abilities to play the game, but this is going to be enough for me. Athletics, oh boy, this is a big discussion. So if you're a mage or an archer, you'll probably want the leg sweep and the mighty kick. Now, the current version of the game, these two skills are a bit nerfed compared to what they were in the beginning of the Rags and Riches update, so yeah, be very careful what you choose, but this is strictly for range builds and such. And the other stuff is just too weak in the beginning to use, in my opinion. So I don't take anything from athletics. And later on you'll be able to use the charges, but again, Don't worry about charging enemies at this stage of the game. Armor combat. Oh boy, this is the important one. So, sadly, this one is 100% always take it. No matter what you're playing, you always have to take this because having having more durability on your weapons and armor means you need to repair them less, which means you'll have more money overall. Plus, you get a lot more bleed resistance and crit avoidance. And some other things. Also, it makes the repair kits better. You can also dismantle armor you get to repair your own. It's kind of shocking how good this is, but again, you have to take it no matter what you do. So, sorry, I have a bit of a cold. Crit avoidance 19%, bleed resistance 22%. And it differs on body parts as well. But, like I said, it's just too useful not to take because it affects the game in such a big way. By the time you finish the game, if you take the skill in the beginning, it will be much better. I recommend you take it after you take all of your combat skills and everything else you need. Over here in survival, again, this is a bit deceiving. I think the developers did a very good job at hiding how useful some of this stuff is. I think, well, butchering is not that useful, right? But what about resourcefulness? It's a passive. It improves butchering. It allows you to find additional items when you're picking up, let's say, herbs, mushrooms, or berries. Which is super useful because if you pick up, let's say, one time, you might get 2 times, or you might get 2 hemps. It will be enough to create a rope. Again, it's very useful. I don't want to get into this, but it ties in with crafting. And you'll have to make a lot of fodder. So if you can gather plants, let's say, twice as fast and twice as many, you'll be able to make so much fodder that you'll never have a problem with this. You can also make it during your travel, especially in the beginning of the game, and sell it. So this is a very underrated skill over here. Plus it gives you 10 fatigue resistance, which is massive considering fatigue has a very interesting way of growing. So basically in longer dungeons, fatigue will become a major issue. So again, it helps with so many things. Plus it gives you 5 experience gain to vigor. Vigor is a buff that is not so useful as a whole, but if you take this in survival, it gets much better. Plus, Hunt Master. Butchering is not so important, but more importantly, you have extra accuracy against animals and plus weapon damage. Plus, again, minus 5% fumble chance, and it also grants you 4% crit chance to vigor. So as you can see, the vigor buff, it's so much better now because you have a crit chance of 4% plus the experience gain. Yeah, it just improves everything as a whole. Again, this is what you take after you are done with weaponry, or at least you think you're done. As for the other stuff over here, again, they're not so important. As for my particular build, oh well, I guess I can show you. I tend to take a lot of passives, a lot of big skills, and of course a stance. Now, from dual wielding, I only took the basic stuff I needed, which is this one over here, the Flurry of Strikes, which attacks a lot of times. Which means you'll always get something, a stagger, a daze, a knockback, a stun, something. And the dual wielding over here because of the main hand efficiency and fumble chance. Main hand efficiency is a skill that, the way I understand it, if you're using dual wielding, it's only useful for dual wielding as far as I understand. The second weapon in your hands will have less stats. Meaning, it will do less damage and it will have a lower chance to inflict its status effects. What does that mean? Well, this is just easier to show you over here. As you can see, the daze chance is 10 and 8.5. But the daze chance is a little better in the first weapon, the main hand weapon. And the secondary weapon, as you can see, has a much lower daze chance just because of the hand efficiency. And I guess that's how you should view it. It's a debuff for your main hand, a little bit to the main hand, but almost 50% to your second weapon. I didn't took too many skills over here, and believe me, this is enough for my build, and that's how you should approach the game. Now, let's go at the stats. As you can see, most of the stuff that I've shown you, after you get your weapon skills and such, is based around making money, surviving, and also helping with the economy of the game a little bit. Because if you make a lot of money, that's not enough. You need to spend less money overall so you can buy a lot of other cool things. As you can see, I don't take too many skills because look at this. I already have five things on my button over here, my hotbar. If you take stuff from warfare, if you take stuff from athletics, where are you going to put all of this? Yeah, I can replace this one butchering, but again, the main idea is to use as little skills as possible and to get as many passives as possible, because you'll not have enough energy to use all of them anyway, so this is more than enough. So focus on having 5 active stuff on the bar over here. Now, stats. Strength. Is strength good? Strength is kind of like the least useful to me because it's mostly going to give you a little bit of damage and a little bit of block, plus then you have body part damage and some other stuff. The issue with this is that first of all you need to hit your enemy, the second issue is that you need to survive the attacks of your enemy, and third, you need to be able to do enough effects, meaning if you focus on crit, day, stagger, stuff like that, you don't really need this. So I guess strength comes in 4th place just because of, well, it's just damage and some resistance, a block chance, but depends on your build overall. Agility. So I guess I should have started with this. In the beginning of the game I have 15 vitality, 15 perception, and then I go for 15 agility, and then I'm not sure what I'll go for, but if you reach that point of the game you're probably fine. So this is why strength is 4th. Why is vitality in 1st place for me? Because you get more health, but you also get more energy restoration, which is a very important thing. So more energy and more energy restoration. So that's why my character is kind of like this. You have a lot of equipment that will negatively affect your energy and energy restoration, especially if you go for heavy armor. So 15 health and the block or recovery is not so important, but control resistance and max health and energy restoration and max energy is super useful, so that's why I take it. Second one, of course, is for the crit chance. +1 vision is not so important. +1 bonus range is not so important. I think it's only for ranged weapons anyways, or spells. But the extra accuracy, the extra armor penetration, and the extra crit chance, too good to pass up. And then why agility over here and not other things? Well, because of the hands efficiency, the counter chance, and the fumble. So you can see counter chance and fumble is very important as well, because when I hit back I really hit hard. And then we'll get the dodge chance, which is basically useless to my character because he'll have a huge negative to dodge anyway, but this will kind of lower that a little bit, so we will not be as bad, but usually my armor absorbs everything. Hands efficiency is very important, and move resistance is also very important. So you have control resistance, and then you have move resistance, and again, this is just for my particular build, but it can basically work for any build you like. Now you might be thinking, why don't I just go for a lot more perception? Well, you need to survive, and that's the main thing. You need to survive and not die, because if you die, dying is actually very punishing in this game, so yeah. And willpower is the last. I guess it can be useful, but unless you're a magic user, this is not so important. Yeah, you'd have some benefits to energy management, but that's not so important, because let me show you what the end game will be like. Armored warfare. Armored combat over here. This is the most important skill tree in the whole game in my opinion, because it gives very tailored stats. As you can see, I don't think I'll ever use this because it's just too costly, and anyway, it doesn't really matter. Battle Forge. This is why I keep saying that armor is very important. So no matter what you choose, light, medium or heavy, armor plays a huge part of the game. So probably I'll range characters like the archer will use medium. Light armor is for mages, heavy is for melee combat, but again, it's too complex to even discuss right now. As you can see, when I'm equipped with a heavy chest piece, remaining on the same tile will grant minus 3% heal energy cost for 6 turns. And also using stance and maneuvers grants minus 10% damage taken until the next turn. And this is not so important because you need to go over here at the custom adjustments. So you can see this is where the game starts. Sadly, this is kind of like Oblivion, the Elder Scrolls Oblivion type of thing, where light armor will give a lot more protection. So it will be a lot better. I guess it's not so big if you think about it, but again, it's going to make light armor protect you a lot more. Medium armor will give you bleed resistance, which is not so important, but heavy armor will grant you max energy and energy restoration. So all of the downsides of wearing the heavy armor will basically be reduced to a very high degree because of that particular skill over here, this particular one over here, and doubles the bonuses if each equipped piece of armor belongs to the same class. So as you can see, light armor will be much more protective. Medium armor still doesn't get much because bleed resistance is not that useful, but heavy armor will actually be usable because it will give you 6 max energy and 2% energy restoration. So yeah, if you think about it, you have 4 pieces of armor, do the math. So this is kind of to show the end game a little bit. Now as for the athletics, athletics are mostly tied to dashing and some other stuff over here, but more importantly you'll get this one, which is 1 range, 30 energy cost and minus duration to all of the charge skills. It'll also give you peak performance, but this is a little harder to maintain. So this is why I think this is not so important, and I really prefer the armor combat bonuses a lot more. And you also have the warfare ones that can also be very interesting, like first for battle. But again, this is based on missing health, and I don't like that. I think I prefer much more armor crusher, just because enemies with armor will be basically paper thin at that point. Also, the final push is not bad either, but again, it's minus health, so don't take stuff that is useful only when you have minus health, and yeah, as you can see, it's going to be very hard to use. I guess you can also use the offensive maneuver, just because it can give you a lot of cool stuff. Plus, you can also kind of switch it around to defensive and offensive, but this will kind of be the last things you'll choose. So if you choose the armored combat for the passives, you either go for athletics with the dashes, or you go for warfare over here with the tactics. I much more prefer the tactics because having block and count... Okay, my food arrived, but let's continue. So as you can see, basically I prefer warfare than anything else over here. Armored combat is of course my first choice, and then it will be warfare. Let's go over here into finisher. And probably armor crusher, I'm not sure yet, but finisher and armor crushers are a good option. And if you like the stances so much, you can also go into the tactical advantage, which will also give you healing. Which is kind of interesting because there are not many skills that will give you health back anyway, so this is basically all of the skills. It's worth noting that if you have a one-handed weapon build, shields can also be pretty amazing with some of the stuff they have, but getting into shields, a main weapon, and then getting all of the skill over here is a bit too much sometimes, so I don't know, it depends on what you're playing as. I prefer dual wielding as opposed to one-handed weapons and shields because it's going to make you a lot more tanky, but if you're going to play a permadeath run, it might be more useful, but otherwise it's a little better to play with the dual wielding because you kill stuff so much faster. Or the two-handed weapons are also pretty good, but again, it's a matter of preference, and I just prefer my own build. Okay, let's go into some of the stats over here, because it might not be very clear in the beginning what all of these are. Basically, here are your main combat stats, your active stats. Armor penetration is also pretty important in some points. Also worth noting that if you enchant your gear, let's say your weapons, you can get shock damage, which is kind of funny because if you kill someone with shock damage, they are electrified and cooked, which looks grisly, but it's kind of funny to see. And you can also give some weapons, if you are very lucky, for example, stun chance. So if you have already a weapon with stun chance and you give it more stun chance, yeah, that's going to be amazing, but it's very hard to get the stuff you want on your weapon. So when you're making a build, make sure you understand that the enchantments will play a huge role in whatever you do. Like for example over here, more energy restoration and more stuff. Also I got a very cool ring. Piercing resistance and crushing resistance, and yeah, you can basically do a lot of things with the enchantments as well. Bonus range, range attacks and certain spells. See, this is what bonus range is. Vision can also be important. If I remember correctly, I have one extra vision for one of these skills. Maybe I'm not remembering correctly. Anyway, again, the other stuff is pretty important as well, but you don't have enough skill points to take all of them. Energy drain will be great, but you need... Usually for energy drain you need cursed artifacts, like a ring or something like that. Keep in mind you also have the resistances to hunger, intoxication, pain and fatigue, which can also play a major part in the game. You can also find, for example, a belt that will give you pain resistance or rending resistance. So keep an eye out on your resistances, as they can really make a big difference. It also kind of tells you that you should be careful in what dungeon you go, but to a much lesser extent, so you can switch gear if you like. But again, nobody really switches gear. It's a mechanic you can use, but not very useful. Magic resistance, as you can see, it's not going to be a lot if you don't have all of the things you need. So going to magic resistance, just know it will be very hard to get enough of it. So that's why I prefer to just have more health. Otherwise, you're not going to have a lot of fun fighting against magic users, and trust me, there are a lot of magic users. Notably is the bandit caster, the bandit mage, which will annoy you to a huge degree. Now let's go over a little bit. This is part of the preparation for combat. Now, in the beginning of the game, I suggest you follow all of the main quests, because that's the best way to do it. As you can see, I completed a lot of quests. For example, none of these are contracts, but I visited all of these places. I got the Forgotten Plain, which is in a cart, an abandoned cart. Mine was over here. The last key for the Miller. Helping Varen. Basically try to do 2 contracts and then just do the main quest, whatever it tells you, because it will give you a lot of items that you'll be able to use in many interesting ways. For example, if you do the main quest at the brewery, you'll get, I think, grain or hops or whatever you get. It's a big trading item, and then you can sell it for a lot of money. And then when you go over here to Manshire, you can visit the winery. You can steal a crate of wine and leave it. Trust me, this is the only way to do it. If you steal something, leave it in your caravan. Don't take it on you, because if you have a stolen item on you, you'll get detected by the guard. So I've been wondering about this a little bit, but yeah, that's how it works. If you steal something, put it in your caravan stash, and after a while it will not become stolen anymore. This is how trading will be done a little bit later, and you have a lot of stuff that will help you that. So this is basically a free item you can pick up from the winery when you go over here to Manshire, and then put it in your caravan. Again, I'm just repeating for the sake of the argument, and put it back in your caravan, and once it's no longer stolen, after you move a while, you can sell it here for a huge amount of money. This is basically all of the money you'd get from a contract, and you're not losing anything. So that's amazing, right? Right. And you always have a little bit of extra stuff you can do. As you can see, I always have a backpack now. The cloak is a little better in a few ways, but generally I like to have the backpack, otherwise you'll not have enough. I carry a dagger just for the purpose of skinning animals if I can, but you can basically leave it empty. You'll also need a crowbar and a lockpick as some of your main equipment. And I'll speak about the food that you should take before a contract. Well, at the beginning you'll mostly be eating pretzels and bread and stuff. Garlic bread is also very good. Pancakes and some other things, but you don't eat food just for the sake of eliminating the hunger. You eat it for restoring morale and sanity. Now, morale and sanity are a very curious mechanic that was modified over time a lot. Basically, you will have bonuses if your morale and sanity are above 50% in combat, and you'll have a lot of bad effects if they are below, if they are in the red, basically. Also, immunity works in a different way. So if you are intoxicated, intoxication will only drop if you have immunity. Also the fatigue and the pain. So basically, the food only exists right now to keep your stats up. So to maintain morale, sanity, immunity, and fatigue in some cases, and pain, but very rarely, you need very good food. Sometimes they will not be available from the start, but yeah, you see the idea. One gives you immunity, so we'll buy it. One is also for immunity. As you can see, it's going to be healthy food. Healthy food, healthy living. Pancakes will give you fatigue resistance and max energy, and that's why I prefer them as well. And then the pickled cabbage, as you can see, it will give you morale for whatever reason. Green salad, immunity. You might as well be buying the food that actually gives you something really good. Otherwise, if you don't have the money, just take whatever you can afford. Potatoes and mushrooms. See, this will actually lower your total fatigue, and this is what I'm talking about. Gives you fatigue and hunger resistance for a lot of time, plus just fatigue overall, minus fatigue overall. And this is kind of like the specialty of the area over here. Minus fumble chance, fortitude, hunger resistance, morale, and immunity. It's delicious, isn't it? So if you're going to do a dungeon, I recommend you have enough food. By the way, the one skull dungeons will basically need 3 pieces of food if you go in full. Throw it on the floor. 3 pieces of food for a 1 skull dungeon, 6 pieces of food or 5 if you're going for a 2 skull dungeon, And if you're going to for a free skull dungeon, well, you're going to need much more than this, and I'm not sure the exact numbers, but I suggest you have about 10 food items with you if you go to such a big dungeon. And you should do the dungeon first and then do all of the looting as your inventory gradually gets more space. For example, if you do a 15-minute dungeon, you will eat the food, kill everyone, and then when you are done eating the food, you'll have a lot of inventory space. This is what people complain about, but that's the way the game should be played, in my opinion. Take a lot of food with you that restores and gives you buffs and also restores some of your stats. And then when you're done fighting, just pick up all of the loot. You don't have to, I guess you can also pick up the loot at the same time in my case because I have the backpack. So what I sometimes do is this. Backpack full of pancakes. Eat. You can eat them straight from the backpack. Now, of course, in the beginning you will not have enough money and the prices will be different because this is max tier, max reputation in Osbrook. So you probably want some other items. Also, when you're in town, buy a few beers as well. Or whatever they have over here to drink. Why? Because you want to restore your morale as much as possible. You might think, well, if you drink, let's say, 3 of this, it will only be 6% morale, but that's the only way to maintain your morale, sadly. Because there are too many things that will reduce it. So this is kind of like the food part. Merchants. Merchants wise, I mostly sell all of the loot I have to the blacksmith. Some things to the merchant over here that the blacksmith will not buy or if he doesn't have money. And the books, the skill books will be sold in Manshard because the merchant in Manshard gives you a lot of money for them. Again, this is only for the beginning of the game. Later you might be able to have better prices in some locations, but not by much. He can also sell you some enchanted items as well, which will be kind of interesting. But mostly you have to buy all of the identification scrolls from him. Because even if you get, let's say, a magical item, you want to sell it, but you cannot sell it unless it's identified, so yeah. You can also sell the mugs back for 1 or 2 gold, but I don't do that, it's boring. He also has some random items sometimes which can be good or can be bad, but mostly I do all of my business at the blacksmith. Now, in the beginning of the game, if you're playing as a fighter or as even a ranger somewhat, one of the first items I recommend you buy is the Splint Van Braces. This is a bonus, it's a huge bonus. Skill energy cost is minus 5%, fumble chance is minus 3%, accuracy is 2%. So this is actually one of the armor pieces that will give you a lot of bonuses. Use it, it's very good. Then I just like to go to the recruit boots, the recruit mail, whatever helmet you have and other stuff. Repair everything, it's expensive. This is something I found in a crypt, so at some point you're just finding, you're going to start find better items. I bought the armor for 2000 in Manshard, and this is something I found as loot. Not many people know this, but you can also repair the crowbar, you can also just buy a new one, but I guess you can just repair it if you like. No big deal. Clean up after me. Now you might as well look at the belt as well and some other stuff. But for the belts we'll go over here to this guy, which is I think the leather maker, but it's the clothes maker here. It doesn't matter, it's the guy that has not plate armor. There are actually a few types of belts. Can give you dodge chance, and some accuracy, block chance, and in my case this is a higher tier item, the pain resistance and some of the other stuff. Whatever you do, don't take these gloves because they're super bad. As you can see, they're quite cheap, but they give you a debuff. You can buy a backpack over here, but you can a knapsack, but you can buy the backpack in Manshire, and all of these will just replace their caravan items on a random percentage. So yeah, over here you're probably going to come for the belts, the backpacks, maybe the cloaks if you like the cloaks. The cloaks are pretty amazing with their fatigue resistance and energy and health restoration, but I'm just too greedy to not pick up the backpack. Plus it allows me to have basically an empty inventory, or as empty as it can get. Over here you might be wondering, what do you buy? Well, you buy the shields. I used to play a lot with the fish shield in the beginning, but I got something better now. Also, if you are not a ranged character, you should use a crossbow. Crossbows are actually very different, even though it doesn't seem like it in the beginning. For example, the belt hook crossbow has a range of 7, which is bad, because by the time you reload, the enemy will be gone. You can also have different penalties to accuracy, so some people prefer the bows, but more or less the same. I guess I have the balanced square crossbow just because I found it, so accuracy is minus 50%. It has a range of 10, so that's more important in my opinion, having a range of 10, and having the bodkin bolts for 10% accuracy. Now some people will recommend you take, where it is, ranged weapons, take aim, 59 accuracy, so that means you'll negate the entire debuff of the ranged weapon, plus you get one more range and more damage. But again, this is not, in my opinion, I don't really need this, because I only use the crossbow to hunt small animals like the birds, the rabbits and the stuff that you see on the lakes, the ducks and stuff like that. I also use the crossbow to draw in enemies and some other stuff. I don't really want to invest any points in the crossbow to take aim, but you can definitely do it if you feel like the game is not going in your way. Or you can just leave the second weapon slot for free so you can take more loot with you, but usually you want a ranged weapon. It's sadly too useful to pass up, especially in the beginning. Yo. So what is my normal loadout? As you can see, I try to take at least 3 bandages. 4 is too much, but I found this one. So I have the rule of 3 or 4. If you are not confident in your ability, use the rule of 4. So 4 bandages or 3 bandages, 4 healing slaves or 3 salves, and then 3 or 4 pain reducing medicine, which is either the soporific sponge or the herbal extract. And then you might as well take 1 or 2 antitoxins. You probably want to take a lot of antitoxins in the beginning, because you don't have enough immunity to reduce the intoxication by your own. So yeah, this is kind of like what you want. And plus, if it's a new game, you want at least 1 or 2 splints. Splints are very important to cure injured body parts, otherwise it will take you such a long time. You also use the healing salves to mend the injured body part, but it takes much longer. So yeah, carry 1 or 2 more splints. If you can find leeches, that's great. They are pretty good, they give you some pain, but overall they heal and you can get them for free. The other stuff from here, you just have schematics, which will go in a little bit later. And this is basically the preparation phase that I said, and this is how I go into most dungeons right now. Again, it depends on the number of skulls and your equipment. When I get more equipment, I'll be able to take less medical supplies with me and less food. I can also make much better food that will be enough for most of the dungeon anyway. But again, it's a whole different topic. Now, you can also do some negotiating for the contracts, but mostly you can get an advance payment or more information, so skip that. Let's go to the caravan, which will be very important. And again, I missed some information, but as you can see, depends on what you find in the field. You can find a lot of... This is a ring I found, by the way. This is also something I found, but I'm just too lazy to change it. I think you can find items with 2 enchantments, but if you enchant it yourself, you can only have 1. Also to explore all of the map tiles, because if you press Alt, you'll be able to see also all of the plants. See? You can see all of the raspberry shrubs, and I can make a lot of fodder, especially with the skills that I showed you. Yo, Varen. Now, what do you do in your base? Well, let's go over the most important caravan upgrades. Now, some people have different opinions. In my opinion, the best caravan upgrade in the beginning of the game, sadly, will be the tent. I know, it seems boring, but after you travel for a long distance, you need somewhere to sleep, and it's a little better to sleep anyway. Plus, whenever you reach a new location, you'll always sleep to save your game, because if you forget to save your game, this might be a problem with the game, but when you arrive at a new location, you should probably sleep so you can save the game, otherwise you'll have a few problems. And then you should go for the praying spot or the chickens. The chicken coop is a little harder to get because you also need the cooking spot, but basically you need a chicken coop for food, the modest 10 for a little more buffs and reducing fatigue a lot faster, otherwise you'd be sitting in town sleeping the entire day sometimes. Also the praying spot, because you'll get the blessing. So these two are important, these two are important. Now the other stuff is not as important as it sounds because it only ties in later. This will give you random items, but it's not so important. Workbenches will not be crafting at the caravan in the beginning, so this is very late. I think I made a mistake by buying this so early. This is going to be good, but this is going to come in later. You can replenish the sanity when you're cooking, but it's quite hard to get. This one is not so important in the beginning. And more importantly, you should focus a little bit on the first tier of the other upgrades, like the caravan range and speed, because that's pretty easy to get. More inventory space if you like it, and then probably the messenger pigeon, I would say, because you can basically call the caravan when you're at a dungeon and then, I don't know, do your business, do your stuff. But most people don't understand another way is that you need to have a lot of stuff in your inventory to upgrade and do a lot of other things as well. As you can see, I'm just making the fodder by gathering all of the plants, and I have 1200. It's not so bad, you can do it. I also like to keep all of my recipes here. Maybe I'll sell them at some point if I find a location. I have a sack of grains. Sacks of grains you can buy from the miller. In the mill. You see they have a little bit of a commodity. I guess you cannot really see very clear what it is, but that's definitely grain or cereal. The icon. That's definitely... I have no idea what that is, but I'll just assume it's drinking stuff. And you'll be able to find more of these things. For example, in Glade, I think this will have lumber and some other stuff, but it's not shown over there. Anyway, you'll be able to travel a long time with the caravan. Now, why is crafting so important later on? Because using the traps will give you huge bonuses. If you cannot kill the boss of a dungeon, you should definitely throw a rope on them or a throwing net. Because they basically will have no block, no dodge, no counter, and they'll have a huge fumble chance. But it's only for a few rounds, I think it's for 3 or 4 rounds. That should be enough to give you a sizable advantage. You can also craft the rope here so you don't have to buy it. You can also make the splints, and it's so easy to make the splints with rope and sticks. So basically gather a lot of sticks, put them in your caravan. Then you can craft the splints over here, the bandages as well, rags and cloth scraps. The scraps you can get from dismantling enemy armor like I showed you. Bedrolls to save your game anytime. So as you can see later on when you hunt and you have enough, I guess rope is used in a lot of stuff. You also have the smoking mix which will increase your morale, but it's such a small reduction. Plus the intoxications and some of the other stuff. Anyway, you can use this for pain reducing purposes and morale changes, but it's not that good. And then you come to the advanced stuff, like the smoke bomb. The empty casing is the stuff that you get after throwing the bomb. It will give the enemies a lot of debuffs, and as you can see it also lowers their vision, so you can have a lot of fun with these effects, especially the accuracy and stuff. You can also craft your herbal extracts over here. So again, just gather all of the herbs and make basically the second part of the chest over here for crafting purposes. I guess I should do that as well. So the second part of the chest, this chest over here, will have only crafting materials. And this over here will have mostly items, things I need for upgrades, trading materials, and some of the other stuff. Okay, so let's go over here to the little bit of If I remember correctly, Jorgrim the dwarf cannot pray to the altars. I hope they changed that because it was a silly thing to do. As you can see, some of the question marks can become roadside altars. What does the altar do? It gives you some damage, mostly defense, but it also gives you 5% experience gain. So 5%, another 5% is 10% more experience, plus the crit chance, plus the sacred damage. I mean, you see where I'm getting at, right? You can basically get powerful buffs just by resting in your camp and then praying over here, and then you can buy something from the shady traders, which is this stuff, Nika, which more importantly gives you 25% experience gain. There are also a few rings that can give you 50% experience gain, but don't bother with those, they're not very good and you need to enchant them. So if you can get 2 of them, that's great, but if you cannot get them and you can get better stuff, that's much better. The problem is that after you use this, you will have an aftermath. So basically you want to get a 1200 blessing, 1200 vigor, 1200 nikaf. And The way I view this, you should only use this before you enter a dungeon and do the combat and then do the looting, because otherwise you might be in a very bad situation where you're left to the aftermath. The aftermath is a terrible effect, let's not go into it. But basically with this stuff, you'll have 30% more experience from a single dungeon, which will be huge, and it will make your character level up so much faster. And I guess I should be starting to use these ones. They're kind of expensive, but trust me, they're really worth it in the long term. Where I found them? Well, I found them in the Rotten Willow Tavern, the Drunken Woodsman Inn. I think they have that as well. The other inns might have them as well. Anyway, just search all of the places for shady people and you'll see what I mean. That's basically it for the beginning of the game. Now you know how to level up faster, how to prepare for stuff. It's over here since it's crafting item. But we cannot do it like in Quasimoor. You have to click on the tab we want to put an item in. Obviously you can also do it like this in case you want to have all of the free space available to you. But then you have to take it out, which is a little more annoying. And this is basically how a dungeon will be from now on, in my opinion. Well, I guess if nothing bad happens. Now about the other contracts, oh, I forgot about it. So if you craft something for the first time, you'll actually get a lot of experience. And if you have resourcefulness, you get more experience from crafting items. Now the first time you craft an item, it might be 100 experience, the second time it's lower, and then it will just get lower and lower until it reaches a threshold. So, don't start crafting before you get this one, because if you craft and have the extra experience, you'll get so much more out of this one. It's not even funny how much more you can get. Can I craft anything? Probably not, but anyway, just know that you'll get a lot of experience and you should focus on stuff like this in the beginning as well, and this two over here. The chicken coop was nerfed recently, but you can basically get a chicken run if you kill the chicken with just a lot of eggs. I guess we can also cook, like you should. Well, we've seen what some of the other stuff will do over here, that cooking can replenish sanity, depending on the complexity of the recipe. Roasting, but you can also go over here to fried eggs. You need 2 eggs. You can also put salt on them. What? Cannot remove it, no. I need a plate. Doesn't matter. Eat it. That's such a weird bug. Okay, let's make more of it, because I also want to show you another thing that I might have forgotten to show you. Because you can also use eating to your advantage in another way. Are you not able to take this out? Okay, Piggy, the satiety bonus. You have a lower, it reduces your dodge, but increases your morale as well as your healing. Healing efficiency is 25%, and morale change is also a little bit more interesting. So, if you are in a dungeon and you have a lot of stuff to rest, just overeat and then rest, because that will make it much better. Can you really not remove this? Well, I guess that's a big problem. Okay, see you next time, bye bye.